right, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me, Logan Arliss here at Illinois Aviation Academy. As we dive into another Webinar Wednesday event, we're excited about, we're going to be talking about air traffic control, operations, training, career path. But before we get into that, I'd like to congratulate the following students for their recent accomplishments. We had a first-time solo and a few newly certified pilots, so great job to these individuals listed. Keep up the good work. And I'd like to introduce tonight's guest, will be Kristen McGinnis of the Dupage Air Traffic Control Tower. Again, we'll be talking about training, operations, and career path. Now, Kristen's also going to be joined by Jason Mikowski, also a member of the Dupage Tower. So if you guys have any questions while we go through the webinar, please don't hesitate to comment. We will get to all of your questions throughout the webinar. So let's go ahead and bring these two on.
Oh,
What's going on, guys?
What's going on?
Hey,
hey,
glad you guys could join us. Kristen, can you hear us all right?
Yep, I got you now.
Great. So I just want to say thank you for your guys' time tonight, being able to give back and educate us on a little bit of your specialty, air traffic controlling. And yesterday was International Air Traffic Controller Day, so I want to say thank you guys for your service, which allows us to operate smoothly and safely up in the air as pilots.
Thanks.
Kristen, you are a pilot yourself, and I had the pleasure of working with you for your private pilot certificate, and you have quite the project going on right now in your RV-10. So
oh my God, look at you. You took my plane. There we go.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about this project and how you made the decision to build an RV-10?
Wow, so you're taking me by surprise here. Yeah, so I acquired this project about last January now, January 2019, so it's been over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And obviously after getting my license at Aviation, I have been wanting a plane for myself. And, you know, shopping around and everything, I've always been fascinated with Cirrus aircraft, and I landed on the RV-10, you know, for various reasons. And obviously this Cirrus is super expensive, but landing on the RV-10, it's very similar. So this project's been going on, like I said, for almost 2 years now, and it's in the test flying phase. So it's got about 25 hours on it or so, and it needs 40 for the test flying. So we're almost there. It's gonna be flying soon.
Well, it looks pretty fun. It looks like a nice airplane. So what color are you going to paint it?
Oh boy, so good question. If you can see the interior on this picture, the seats are like black and lime green. So if anyone knows me, I really like the neon colors.
Yeah, you do.
I'm gonna have some lime green in it. Probably like a blue or gray or black. Haven't really decided exactly on that, but definitely lime green.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to taking a ride in it with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So Jason, you are on the board for the DPA ATCT Local Safety Council and the Pilot Outreach Program fundraiser. And so you guys are doing a fundraiser selling t-shirts. So could you tell us a little bit about this fundraiser and what buying a t-shirt would mean?
So basically what the funds go towards, it's all our pilot outreach programs. Unfortunately, this year we were going to launch big, but then COVID kind of hit. So we do have the monthly coffee with controllers on the first Saturday of every month. Normally we try to do a couple barbecues like between the beginning of summer and end of summer. On top of that, we also do a bunch of community outreach. So twice a year we are trying to do a blood drive at the airport. That also helps to kind of cover any presentation costs that come up, since we do out to the different schools, grade schools, just to like talk about the job, and then high schools for career days for careers in aviation. We partner up with a couple of different pilots from different airlines and different programs. So that's really kind of what the funding goes towards, since with us being a small facility, we don't get as much funding as the bigger facilities like O'Hare would or the center.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. So how is the coffee with controllers? Is that still operating right now?
No, unfortunately, because both DuPage County, the Airport Authority, and the FAA kind of are really just being extra precautious to not expose people and not have it being backtracked to either us or the airport itself. They've kind of put a stop to it. We tried doing a couple virtual ones, but it's just a lot different without being able to do it in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we look forward to that coming back. And also wanted to mention that you guys can purchase one of these T-shirts at IAA in our pilot shops. We have both black and navy T-shirts there. So make sure you guys pick one up. We'll get into some of the questions now. So this can be for each of you. But what made you decide on this career path? And was there a specific moment that you realized that you were passionate about it?
I guess I'll go first. Ladies first, right?
Yep,
So,
I'm a gentleman.
this is a good question because I grew up in like small town Alabama where I wasn't exposed to aviation very much, if at all. I honestly didn't even fly in an airplane until I was 15 years old. So I was not exposed to it. I went to school for a totally different degree. I actually went for engineering. I picked up a job in engineering, got my master's in it and everything, and just decided that it was not for me. And I just wasn't passionate about it. I hated going to work. I mean, it's a great career, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't for me. And ever since I was a kid, you know, I've been so fascinated with airplanes, and, you know, I went to as many air shows as I could, but I just didn't think it was really possible being from small town Alabama to get into aviation. And eventually I just decided I wanted to leave my job. I want to apply for everything in aviation I can, see if I can get a career in it. And I did. I got the controlling gig here. I tried to get a gate agent or just something, but controller it was. And I was really nervous about it because I didn't know anything about it. I ended up going through the program in Oklahoma City, like all of us do, that didn't come military. And I loved it. It was great. The people are awesome. It's a lot of fun. I can't even explain to you just how much fun it was. And I really, you know, found that that was my passion. I enjoyed going to work. I enjoyed what I did, and I was a much happier person about it. So that's kind of my background.
Awesome. How about you, Jason?
So I went to Riddle. I got a bachelor's in airport and airline management. Afterwards, I got a master's in revenue management, just because I thought that was what I wanted to do. Not really, because in office jobs obviously are not as exciting as staring out windows all day. After Riddle, I ended up flying for SkyWest and Colgan for a couple of years, got furloughed from both before Colgan kind of went under with Pinnacle and all that. After that, I flew charter and just fairing flights for a while. So I got typed in mostly Lears, but a couple citations as well. Then that just kind of got old. I started applying for ATC. I probably have one of the longest application trails. It took me almost 9 years from my first application to actually getting hired in. So I literally just made the age cutoff, since we do have a cutoff at 31. Then after flying, I worked corporate for a bit in logistics and flight operations for Pepsi. Then I finally got picked up at Oklahoma City for air traffic control, and now I'm here 2 years later.
That's awesome. Now, so you were a pilot first. So when times were good before COVID, was there any interest in you to jump back into the airlines and try to go that route again?
No, I mean, I'm not going to toe the like rah that you see on different posts that, oh, air traffic control is the best job. Like, it's a cool job, don't get me wrong, but for me, I work 4 days a week. I make 6 figures, and I'm going to retire 15 years before everybody else. At the end of the day, like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm in it for the money and for the quality of life.
Absolutely. Now, each of you ended up at Dupage. So how did that come about?
So I don't know what Kristen's was like, but I know there's a new process in place. So basically now it's when you apply for air traffic control, do not have any idea initially of whether you're even going to go tower or center. So right now the way it kind of breaks down is 4 out of 5 classes end up as center controllers. So you're really fortunate and lucky to get to a tower. The difference is obviously our pay scales are lower on the tower side starting out since we max out at level 7 towers. So towers and all ATC facilities are rated between a level 4 and a level 12. So level 4 is like your Aurora. We're a level 6. Your O'Hare's, LAX's, most centers are 12s. Chicago Approach is a 12. And if you go the center route, you'll start at level 10 to 12. So your starting pay is going to be a lot higher, but your training time, you're looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 years now before you're fully certified. Whereas a place like DuPage, average checkout time is like, I think by the time Kristen finished training me, since she was one of my trainers, it's like 8 months,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's a lot of people less than a year. It can be around a year.
Yeah. So when you're at the academy, they will, before you get your actual offer letter for the academy, the final one to go, that's when you find out if you're going to be either a center going for the center class or for the tower class. And then when you're going through your evaluations at the end of the whole course, they will give you a list 3 days before where it's one facility per person. And then based on your class ranking at the end of it is your sequence to pick that class or pick what facility you want to go to.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, that's kind of the driving incentive to do your best at the academy.
For sure. Absolutely. So we'll move on to the next question here. So what's your role? So what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What does it look like to walk the shoes of an air traffic controller and do what you guys do?
All right, I'll kind of pick this up since Jason just talked. So we work rotating schedules. We usually start on a like an afternoon shift, and then we'll gradually go throughout the week, start to go to an earlier shift, and then end on a midnight shift. So our days are obviously we get there at different times and work different shifts throughout the week. Once we get to work, we usually go immediately upstairs. And once you get upstairs, there's basically 3 positions that we have at DuPage Airport. Obviously, every tower is different and the center is going to be different. But in our tower, we have a flight data clearance delivery position, which sometimes we combine with ground control, or most of the time I'd say we combined it. So that's where we're going to read you clearances or any other flight plan issues that we need to work out. And then ground controls, obviously we're controlling all the aircraft on the ground. So that's like one position that we usually have combined up there. Or we would go up there and we would take the local, which is what we call it as air traffic controllers, which you guys know it as tower control position, which is obviously working on the aircraft in the air. And pretty much when we show up to work, rotation is already kind of set through the day, so we don't really know if we're going to get on ground or if we're going to get on local. We obviously have to certify in all the positions to be a certified controller there. So we can work any position in the tower. So like I said, we kind of show up, we're pretty much placed on a position. We work it for an hour to 2 hours. Like I said, some towers are different. And then we have to take a break because they don't want us to be up there too long at a time. And on the break, you know, a lot of times, sometimes we're writing training reports, sometimes we're doing computer-based training, different things like that. And then the next time we go up to the tower, which however long our break is, we usually rotate to the next position. So the opposite position that we just worked. So if I started on tower, I would take a break and I'd go upstairs and I'd be on ground the next hour. And then, like I said, we do, or I haven't said it yet, but we do a lot of training at DuPage. It's a training tower. So you have to certify to be a trainer there. So sometimes we'll go upstairs and we have to train someone on that position. And like I said, we write training reports on our breaks. It kind of varies on what we do, honestly, as far as what position we take. But the 3 main positions in the tower, we're obviously going to take one of those.
Absolutely. And how long is a typical shift for an air traffic controller?
So we work 8-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And we have to have for the most part, a 9-hour break in between shifts. Shifts. We need a 9-hour rest period between shifts for the most part. I mean, it does change a little bit on certain shifts. So we are required that rest between shifts, but 8-hour shifts, and then they don't like us to go more than 2 hours on a position before we need to be relieved for some kind of break, a bathroom break or something like that.
And then regardless of staffing, we can't go over 10 hours on a shift at all.
Yeah, no more than 10. So if they need to assign overtime, we can only usually do an extra 2 hours and then we have to leave.
Great. We'll move on. Next question here. I guess we'll go to Jason first. What do you love most about being an air traffic controller?
For me, like I said, the money and quality of life. Before all this hit, I would literally, so my shifts, my work schedule is Thursday through Monday, but my Monday shift starts Sunday night at 10 p.m. and ends at 6 a.m. Monday morning. So before all this COVID hit, every other week I would literally be jumping from Dupage to O'Hare and just catching a flight out somewhere for 2-3 days, go out to Boston, Florida, California, Texas. And you really can't beat that kind of schedule other than anything in aviation, because our schedule, no matter what side of the aviation field you're going to be on, everything's kind of shift based because it's a 24/7, 365 kind of thing.
Yep.
So so for me, that's definitely the biggest thing. Just the fact that I have middle of the week off to where I can do whatever I want. If I have errands to run, nobody's out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, really. Like I said, it's pretty much working only 4 full days, even though that 5th shift is what we call a quick turn. So it's a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then you get 8 hours of rest, and then 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. again, the same day. But that gives us a 3.5-day weekend every week.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. How about you, Chris? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so speaking of the quick turn, that's what I'm on right now. So I just got off at 2 p.m. this afternoon. I actually go in tonight at 10 p.m. So that's what he's talking about, the quick turn. So I should be sleeping right now, but I'm volunteering my time because I love talking about aviation.
What a saint.
I know.
We appreciate it.
So yeah. So like Jason said, the schedule is amazing. It's nice that we rotate the times that we're working each day, because we can schedule doctor's appointments or anything like that, because sometimes we're on the night shift and we have all day to do things like that. I actually wrote kind of a list of things because there's so many good things about being a controller. Another thing is that we don't take any work home with us.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Is the biggest deal for me, because I actually quit my last job because I was salary based. So I would actually leave work, I would bring everything home with me, still be working, go back to work, still be working. And I was just constantly working, weekends, everything, no overtime. It was constantly working. But this job, my shift ends, I go home, I don't have to worry about anything. I drop everything. I don't have to worry about tomorrow or anything, because tomorrow's a new day. Like, it just starts over. No work I have to bring home or anything.
Yeah, kind of to tie off that, we're all hourly based. We're not salaried at all. So because of our union contract that we have with the FAA, we also get paid differently depending on what day of the week it is and what time we work. So we get a premium pay if we work Sundays. We get premium pay if we work between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So that's another big incentive for just picking different shifts and different days off. Whereas when you get seniority, it's kind of like in the airlines, when you get seniority base, you hold better lines where you don't have to work as much and you still make more.
Absolutely.
Like Jason said too, the early retirement, can't beat that. I mean, it's a fun job too. Like, you get to go work, you get to talk to pilots, you get to watch the airplanes. Like, I mean, who doesn't like doing that? It's so much fun.
Yeah, we literally get paid to stare out the window.
Yeah, you're staring out the window all day, you're having fun, you're talking to people that you generally know around the airport. And then another thing I was going to add too, because this is big for me, is the dress code. There's not really a dress code, but the fact that I can wear, jeans and a t-shirt, or whatever I want to work, as long as it's not, vulgar or anything. But there's no dress code. My last job, I'd have to come in business casual every day. But this job is so relaxed. You're not around management a lot. So you're just not having to be presentable because you're behind the mic, So that's another good thing about it.
For sure. And we had a question come in asking, what do ATC controllers do in the tower when it's a very slow day at the airport?
All right, Jason.
So I'll take this one. So small facility like ours, I feel like Dupage Tower is actually very unique as far as other airports, even like centers where we have a very tightly knit group of controllers. So we all hang out outside of work. We all talk, like we all get along great, which it's not always the case, just like any other job. And I'm sure anytime you guys have maybe even like flown over, you'll see like our grill going during the summer where we're just hanging out. On slow days, we're not allowed to have phones or iPads, laptops, anything like that in the tower. So during day shifts, because there's three of us on a shift usually. Three people hang out and we just chit chat, catch up. For the midnight shifts, like Kristen's going on tonight, we're allowed to have like books, magazines, crossword puzzles, Sudoku, and the radio on. So that's kind of how we make it through. And then there's usually other stuff to be done as well. So there's paperwork to be done. Like Kristen was saying, we do a lot of training where, like, coming from an airline pilot back, I would literally go away for 3 days a year just for recurrent. Whereas for us, we have 2 full recurrents a year every 6 months. And then every usually couple days, we have different briefing items we have to go through and update. We have different computer-based instruction courses that we have to take, different certifications just to advance, kind of like for training. That's a different course, anything like that. So there's usually a lot of stuff to always be done on behind the scenes that people don't see, like the local safety side. We send out the 1 email a month, but that's usually a couple meetings that we have amongst just our members on the controller side. We have 1 meeting a month with management on it as well to kind of go over. We go to the different facility visits. We coordinate with other facilities, especially being underneath approaches, airspace. It's a lot of back and forth with them on what they can do to help us, what we can do to help them. So even though it's slow, we're always usually doing something.
Yeah, and then we're not up there all 8 hours of our day, you know, so we're up there, like I said, max of 2 hours usually, and we're on break and stuff.
For sure. So now we know why it's so great to be an air traffic controller, but what is the most challenging part about being an air traffic controller?
From my standpoint, I think at least the most challenging part so far for me has been going from zero experience, because I came from a completely unrelated field, to being a certified controller. So I went from knowing nothing about phraseology. I mean, I knew a little bit about airplanes, but runway environment, nothing. I knew nothing about it. And then you have to go through training at the do.
Oh, we're back here. All right, good. We had a little internet problem here for a second. All right, great. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I got you.
All right, fantastic. So next question, we'll move on here to what are the various roles or jobs that one can pursue within the world of ATC? So you mentioned TRACON earlier, Tower. What are some other options for you, being a trainer, maybe a supervisor? What do those career paths look like?
I guess I'll take this one.
Yeah, sure.
So literally, unlike pretty much every other job there is outside of like being a pilot and A&P, like everything in aviation, kind of like once you're in that job, that's pretty much where you're going to stay. There's not a lot of like climbing a corporate ladder or anything like that. So for us, once you get to your first facility and you get certified, then you can start putting in paperwork to transfer to other facilities. So for us, for example, like we mention all the time in our emails that we send out, we're not radar controllers. So the radar controllers are going to be your center guys and your approach guys. Now, there are towers that have approach with the towers. That's called an up-down. So those guys get a radar ticket. Same thing with the center guys, whereas we don't have a radar ticket. A lot of people can find that as like desirable. So if people will want to go from a place like Dupage to usually an up-down to kind of get a feel for if they like even working in the radar environment or if they just want to stay tower only. If they do, some people will go from there to like a Chicago approach, which is a level 12, so it doesn't get any higher. Some people will just climb different up downs. Miami's a great example. They're a level 12 up down where you're working tower and the approach. You have places like Orlando, which is a level 10, so still decent traffic and volume that you have to push through, plus all the weather out there. And then a lot of it, because like we mentioned, you don't really have a say of where you're going to go. A lot of people try to either go back to where they're originally from or somewhere where they've liked before living, for example. So me, I got fortunate. I'm actually from the Schaumburg Hoffman area originally. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. So for me, DuPage was ideal, but going to living in Florida, like I have paperwork to transfer down there just because I like the the weather mostly. The traffic is a lot different than what we're used to just because we're very seasonal here. So I'd say those are probably the biggest. You can go to the supervisor position, and then from there you can go to an air traffic manager, which is the facility manager. As far as training wise, being a trainer for a place like DuPage, every controller that gets certified goes through the training course to be a certified trainer as well. Once you get to the busier or bigger facilities where you have a lot more controllers, like your centers, they have dedicated training staff, and then certain controllers can opt to be trainers as well. They don't have to be. So that's kind of the career progression for us. So a lot of it's just moving facility and moving to higher pay bands.
And how hard is it to get accepted at another facility? So is that all just based off of seniority?
It's based partially off seniority. It's based off of time of service. So there's a whole rating scale that goes through, and it's probably like, I'd say a 10, 15 page app for each facility that we have to fill out. It rates your experience. So if you have pilot experience, if you have an instrument rating, a multi-commercial, you get more points.
Hmm.
The more time you spend at a facility, you get more points. The higher level of the facility, the more points. And then part of it is also they will review like whether you've been in local safety council, if you're on the OSHA team, stuff like that, but that's not as important. So it's just seniority based, and a lot of it is just what the staffing level at your facility is and where you want to go. So the more desirable facilities are usually pretty well staffed, and that's because they always can pick and choose their applicants. So it's not unheard of for people to be out of the academy and you're waiting 3, 4, 5 years before you get picked up where you want to go.
Wow. So we know Jason wants to get down to Florida. Kristen, are you going to be leaving DuPage anytime soon?
I mean, eventually they call DuPage the country club, you know, because we have it made there. So it's pretty hard to leave. It's a great facility. You know, I've talked about going down to the Dallas area at some point. I've thrown out Phoenix, a lot of places I've thrown out, but not 100% sure right now, just because with the coronavirus and everything, it's kind of slowed things down a little bit, which we'll get to that. Yeah, I'm just kind of hanging out at the country club right now.
Yep.
Life is good.
Like DuPage is probably one of the best places you can end up waiting out to get picked up.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Well, we enjoy having you guys here, that's for sure. So you mentioned Oklahoma is where you go for training. So what does that training schedule, what does that training footprint look like for an air traffic controller?
So I went through before Jason, so it may have changed since I've been through. I went through in 2014. And so as far as like qualifications and everything, when I went through, it was you either needed to have a bachelor's degree or 3 years work experience. Jason, correct me.
Yep. Nope, that's still right.
Under 31 years old to apply.
No, it's under 31 at the time of receiving your offer letter now.
Okay. All right. So offer letter. So you have to be offered the job by 31 years old. And obviously English speaking, some of your basics like that. I can't think of any other, just
Yeah, U.S. citizen.
US citizen, stuff like that. So once, like Jason said, once you get that offer letter, you show up to Oklahoma City, they basically assign you if you're going to be tower or en route center controller. We had no choice in that. And I think when I went through the tower process from no experience, it was about 3 months or so to go
Yep.
through training in Oklahoma City. And then center was about 5 months or so. Four months or so. Okay. So that's going from like basic training where they just teach you all the book stuff to simulator training. And then once you pass that, it's pass or fail right now.
Yep.
Pass or fail still. They give you a list of facilities, and by your ranking in your class, you get to go to whatever, you know, you pick. If you're the number one in the class, you get the number one pick, and so on. Then you show up to your facility, and as far as training at your facility, it depends on where you go. Dupage, like we said earlier, is usually less than a year, maybe around a year, depending on when you show up. Obviously, if you show up in the wintertime, then the training's not as good because we have, you know, not as many operations in the winter. So the training kind of slows in the wintertime here. So it's a little bit longer for certification, I'd imagine, if you go down south somewhere where you have consistent traffic year long. For the centers, I believe it's a few years for certification, right? And then
Yeah, I think the lowest I've seen is like 2.5 years.
yeah, so
And most
I mean,
centers have training backlogs of anywhere between 50 to 70 controllers just waiting to train.
yeah. So I mean, once you get to the facility, like at Dupage, you have to go through all those 3 positions I was talking about. You first start on clearance delivery, flight data. Once you certify there, you go over to ground control. So it's basically you're starting at the easiest stuff, and you go over to ground, and then you go over to towers, the last certification. And then you know, everyone's different on how long it takes them to get through it.
So the application process, is there a test or a knowledge exam that you have to take to apply, and how competitive?
Oh boy.
How competitive is it, or has it become to get selected to go to training?
Oh, but it really depends on the time of the year and that because they only open up the application once a year. And it's now from what I've heard that they have an X number that they want to hit for applicants. And once they hit it, it closes. So I think one of the last, the one that they did earlier this year was open for 4 days. The one before that was open for like just barely over 2 days. From my class, I got hired on from the 2018 class. There were 30,000 applicants.
Wow.
So they do tend to be very big application pools, but it is a very long and time-consuming process. So part of it is when you apply initially, there's, I want to say like 100 or 120 question, just kind of like a basic personality assessment, just to see if, based on what they think makes a good air traffic controller, personality trait wise. Once you pass that, if you do, you get invited to take what's called the ATC, which is basically our standard test for entrance. And in there, I haven't taken the new one, but as far as I know, there's a math portion which is ridiculous. They will give you like 5 or 6 digit numbers to multiply by each other, and you have 2 seconds to get the closest answer out of 4. Then
yeah, when I was doing it, they would have like airplanes flying around, and you had to like click on where you wanted them to go and land at the airport while doing like math at the bottom of the page. So it was like multitasking. It was like weird stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of multitasking problems, memorization, just quick. They'll flash a number, they'll flash another one, and they'll ask you like what the next one in sequence would be. There's word association problems, so they'll give you a lengthy word problem, and you have to solve like Jerry lives next to Sally. Sally has a dog. Mark has a blue house. Kevin lives at the corner, and then like based on all those clues, you kind of have to figure it out, and it's all time based. So it's mostly just how you prioritize everything, your time management, and like your multitasking, like Kristen said, because that's really kind of what we use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
If you pass that, yeah, if you do pass that, you can either go into 2 pools. So there's a qualified pool, which I believe is 85% and up, and well qualified, which is 95% and up. So obviously you want to get the better score. They don't actually tell you what your score is anymore, I don't believe. They just send it that, hey, you passed and you've been referred to the next step, or you didn't. So if you do pass, you go into the referral list, which basically it's a giant lottery. At that point, they sit down and they pull names out of the hat to continue. If you're selected, then you start going through you have to do a medical check, psychological evaluation, which is the MMPI test. You have to do a credit check, a background check, where an investigator will come out and check you out. For me, they talked to like a couple of my friends actually too. So it's very thorough. Once you start passing all that, then that all gets sent over to the hiring process in Oklahoma City. They will get together, figure out the next class date, and send you your final official offer letter.
What a process. So
It's very lengthy. It can take anywhere from 6 months to about 2 years just to get onboarded after you apply.
wow. So if somebody doesn't pass initially, can they reapply?
Absolutely. Even if you do pass, you can literally just continue applying, and it just adds your name to the next pool and so on. So there have been people that literally will apply every single year, and that way you kind of help your chances in a way.
Yeah, for
Keep a
sure.
port-
So both of you guys are pilots or have been pilots. How does that help you do your job, or does it help you? So being a pilot, does that help you control traffic in the area? If so, how so?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we're looking out the window. So when we see the airplane in the different phases of flight, we can pretty much picture what the pilot's doing at the time. And then we can understand the difficulties of having to fly an airplane and talk to controllers at the same time. So we kind of understand that more than someone who's probably never flown at all. It's not easy.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
the
it kind
hardest
of
part.
ties into the whole concept of flying and you have a sterile cockpit, right? Where if
Yeah.
you've flown before, you roughly know when and where you can change things. It also is a huge help with the phraseology. Big difference is that pilot phraseology is not it's more of a suggestion than mandatory, other than certain readbacks, whereas we have very strict prescribed phraseology that we have to use for everything. That's why, especially for hold shorts and runway crossings, you'll hear us say read back, hold short. And that's kind of a lot of, I'm sure if you've seen in the email, why we've moved over to standby and Roger, because with those calls, we don't need a response or a readback of the entire transmission. Whereas if I tell you to hold short, I need your call sign, hold short, and what you're holding short of.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Let's move on to, so we have are currently still going through the whole COVID situation. So how has the coronavirus affected operation procedures in the tower?
So right now we're minimum staffing in the tower, which is usually 3 people on a shift. And that means 2 in the tower at a time, and then 1 person on break. And then that 1 person will come up and relieve the next person, and we'll kind of just keep rotating between the 3 people. So they're just trying to, minimum exposure with everyone there, keeping as, many people out of the tower as possible. And then we're supposed to be social distancing, obviously, the 6 feet rule. If we cannot maintain 6 feet between each controller, we have to wear a mask. But for the most part, our tower is pretty big. So we're pretty good with our social distance procedures. Other than that, as far as how it's affected us is we've stopped training. Unfortunately, the entire industry, like there's no more air traffic control training right now. I mean, they're just now starting to kind of pick it up, or were until recently, maybe.
Well, let me correct it. There's no more training at the facility level. So the academy is still going, but
at the
they
facilities,
basically
yeah.
pass the academy and they get transferred to their facility. And I think
They
we've
can't
had 2 trainees sitting for 2 or 3 months now, waiting to get in and actually start training on positions.
Yep. So basically they're sitting at home until we can train again. So right now, there's just no movement within the tower. We're all just kind of waiting around for our new trainees and when they can come in.
For sure. And as we climb out of the whole COVID situation, what does the future look like for the demand of controllers? So is there a need for more controllers as we move into the future here?
So I think that's kind of really just left in the air right now. Historically, it's no secret that there's a controller shortage nationwide. I think that now it might be one of those things where it might alleviate a little of that headache, but at the same time, a lot of our staffing is due to the number of positions that we have and just the amount of uh, time that has to be staffed. So for us, for example, we're a 24-hour facility, so we have to have X number of people to staff 3 during the day, 3 in the afternoon, and then 2 on the midnight shifts every single day. Plus, to have an allotment for people to be able to take time off, go on vacation, have a normal life, just because with the rotating schedule, I think that's one of the biggest thing that kind of gets people like if you have kids, families, different obligations, you're missing out on a lot of that. Whereas a normal Monday through Friday, or even airline wise, where you're working 4 on, 3 off, or something like that, or sitting reserve, where we're 5 days on, 2 days off. So I think that's kind of going to be one of the biggest things. I know that we are on target to hit our hiring goal for this year, which is a big surprise considering last year with the shutdown that kind of stopped everything. So we missed it there. I know internationally, since a lot of countries have privatized their air traffic control, I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but Canada basically let go, I think, something like 400 of their controller trainees because it's a private company. So they don't have the same protections we do. And I think that's going to be a huge disservice because just like flying, you're not going to be able to ramp that up as quick. Whereas for us, we're able to, for example, with you guys being the bulk of our traffic, this month we're pretty much on track to be the same point we were last year. So our volume's not so much as affected. Same thing with most training towers and VFR majority towers. It's the big centers. So Chicago Center, Chicago Approach, O'Hare, Midway, all the ones that rely on that commercial traffic. And that's what's going to hit hardest since a lot of our funding, I think something like 80% of where we actually get funded and the airports get money for all that is the airports improvement program, and that's funded mostly by the fees paid by the airlines. So that's probably where we're going to see the biggest hit due to the lower volume of them flying.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for a young individual who wants to get into air traffic controlling, let's say they're looking at college, looking at universities, what degree would you recommend, if any, that would relate to what you guys do? And is a college degree still required to become an air traffic controller?
Like Kristen said, no, you need a high school diploma and 3 years of work experience or a bachelor's. Again, I'm not one to sugarcoat it, so I would, if anybody ever asked me, should you go, so there's what's called the CTI program, College Training Initiative, which is FAA sanctioned for controllers. I would say absolutely, you might as well just burn that money because one, there's no guarantee that you'll even get a job as a controller through the FAA, and two, what happens if you get to a facility where you wash out and you don't pass? Now you have a worthless degree. So it's really one of those things where it's a gamble. It does help if you do get in, but it doesn't help you get in or even get further in the process. I think last time they actually looked at numbers, the off the street hires like myself, Kristen, and majority of controllers now coming through have come from no background, and they are doing just as well as the ones that got a 4-year degree for air traffic control through one of those programs. So anybody looking degree wise, I would say the best thing to do, find something you actually like to do and get a degree in that and just keep applying. I've had multiple friends that they're on their senior year in college and they get an offer to become a controller. Cool. I'll put that on pause. Let me go try air traffic control. If I make it, fantastic. If not, I have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most controllers will say, like, make sure you have a backup plan because like I said, so my hiring pool was 30,000. Out of us, only 1,500 got picked up.
Yep.
The academy can only put through, I think, at a maximum rate of 1,700 controllers a year. So it's really just a numbers game, and it's a luck of the draw thing.
Yep, and you pretty much have to drop everything to go to the academy. You quit your job, everything, you're going out there, and you make it. So
Yep.
definitely have a plan B if you can.
For sure.
Yeah, I think when you were asking, like, one of the challenges was, like, for me, I will tell you, the academy is probably the roughest thing that you do as an air traffic controller. You are completely thrown. You have 2 weeks notice to get to the academy. You show up, you don't know anybody there. You're thrust into a house with 1 or 2 other people that you've never met before. Or you can get an apartment on your own, but that doesn't make sense because a lot of what we make at the academy is our per diem allowance. It's 5 weeks of basics, which if you're off the street, it's a lot to take in. It's like, I wouldn't say it's like drinking from a fire hose, but it's pretty similar. It's a lot of information. You have to learn different aircraft identification, start learning the phraseology, the rules, regulations, the different manuals that we find all the rules and regulations in. It's a huge test after that. That's pass fail. In my class, 2 guys didn't pass it. So because it's a federal facility, you get escorted by the federal like security service. It's a very awkward thing to witness. If you do pass that, you go into your initial training, which then it's really, you take that material that you learned in those 5 weeks and condense it down to 2 weeks. So you're going through, or not even, I think it was like 5 or 6 days maybe. So that's really like drinking through a fire hose, and that's when they start drilling you on, you have to know this. The phraseology has to start getting on point. Classes are 8 hours long. Then after class, you're probably studying for another 3, 4, 5 hours with your study groups and running just scenarios. Once you get into evaluations, like I said, again, it's a pass-fail thing. You have 4 evaluations for tower. You have 2 on ground, 2 on the tower position. You need to get above 70, kind of like on your written test for any pilot certificate. And as soon as you fall below that threshold, it is a very public, like, you're escorted away. The security team shows up. They escort you to your car. They have to escort you off base. Like, you're not allowed to talk to anyone. That's really kind of like the roughest part of all this. Once you pass that and get to your facility, it's really a lot more laid back.
Well, you spend, like I said, for Tower about 3 months in that total training in Oklahoma City. So you're spending 3 months, and then it comes down to the last 2 days, basically, whether you're actually a controller or not. So those last 2 days in the simulator, like Jason said, score above a 70, I believe you said.
Yep.
I mean, it comes down to that. If you don't score above 70, then you're out. You spent the last 3 months just learning how to be a controller, but you're not going to be one.
And you can lose points so quick.
Yeah, it's very.
If you forget to say a November or type, that's like 1 or 2 points at a time.
Yeah.
And usually you fall into the
Little
habit of
things.
not saying it. And I've seen people that will literally get basically negative points. So they get a 0 for the scenario. And that it is almost impossible to come back from.
Yeah, so good to have a backup plan then, because it sounds like it's a gamble to even get selected and then make it through the entire training program. So some good advice there. I'd like to ask you guys, so we have many pilots watching. What are some things that pilots do or say that bug you as an air traffic controller? And what advice would you give to pilots to better communicate with you guys?
This is our favorite question.
Oh boy. How much time do we have?
Yeah. So as far as at Dupage, one of the main things that I think bother a lot of us is when you're on the runway, like the time on the runway, when you're cleared to land and you land, like get off the runway, because there's usually someone behind you. So don't spend a lot of time on the runway if able, because people are either landing or taking off. Exit the runway as soon as possible, and don't block an intersection. So if you guys are familiar with Dupage, we have intersecting runways that we use very often. And sometimes pilots will do a stop and go right at the intersection of the two runways. Not a great idea because you're basically shutting down the entire airport when you do something like that. Some of the other things, what would you say, Jason?
Oh boy, my time to shine, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things.
Uh,
Another
the
thing is when
standby
you,
thing, it is probably one of the
yeah,
biggest things. Like, it's clear who actually reads the pilot controller glossary and who doesn't based on the way people respond to certain things. I mean, that book's out there for a reason. It's literally so we don't have to hold hands when it gets busy. So if we tell you standby, we don't need to read standby back. A lot of people will read back the full transmission, which newer pilots we get. But if once you start getting towards the multi guys or the guys that we know are working on the commercial, like by then you should really know better. The time on the runway thing, again, that's a huge thing. Which if we have to start issuing go arounds and if it's like a jet, that does end up at FISDO too. So you may get knocks if they see you starting to do it more often. A lot of pilots will wait for us to issue an instruction, which even the AIM says to vacate at the first available one or whatever
yep,
we tell you. So
get off
we'll
the
see you
runway.
guys going less slower than a taxi speed down an active runway, which I've actually started calling. I'm sure somebody from Illinois Aviation Day, somebody even on the call has heard where over frequency. I'm like, I told them, I'm like, I know they look identical, but it's an active runway and I need you to get off.
Yep. Yeah.
Again, vacating the runway, like for myself and Kristen, we're both pilots. We both remember what it's like. We've timed multiple planes and there's literally no reason you should be blocking an intersection for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes doing a debrief when I need to get planes off the runway and moving.
Yep.
Like the
Don't
intersection,
just sit there.
that's not a place to do a debrief. We know it's like what, 5 steps for a cleanup on a Skyhawk in the POH, give or take.
Yep.
Like, and I'd say for a place like Dupage, there's 2 or 3 of us that are CFIs, a couple instrument rated pilots, and a couple other private pilots, and a couple other ones that just got some flight training. So most people at our tower actually do have an idea of the workload and what goes into it. But it's just during those busier times that it's one of those things where you guys will start seeing delays, whereas I'm sure you've noticed that you look out the window when you're holding short and we tell you to hold short for another plane that's maybe on his base where you might have been able to get him out, but due to just past experiences, now we're adding more and more separation.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then when you call ready for takeoff, we expect you guys to be ready. I mean, we know a new pilot is going to take a little bit of time, maybe get a little nervous, want to line up correctly on the runway. So it's going to take a little time. I would recommend if you are like a student pilot who's not super comfortable with just pulling on the runway and going, let us know. Say, request a short delay, something like that. So just communicate with us. Tell us,
Yeah.
hey, short delay because I'm not comfortable with, going immediately. But we expect you guys, if you call ready, take that runway and go because we usually have someone, landing right behind you or wanting to take off right behind you. So just let us know like that. Another thing too is maybe not call like right on the edge of the airspace that you're inbound. Like give us a little time to plan, especially when it's really busy. Call about 10 miles out. That's what we like at Dupage. Let us know about 10 miles out that you're inbound and start moving airplanes around to fit you in. And, we don't have to wait till last minute to move everyone and, oh no, you're inbound, or either tell you to stay outside the Delta. We don't want that. We want you guys to be able to come inbound. So give us some time.
Yeah. I think the only other thing is just communication wise. It's not really a problem with you guys, but I'm sure you guys as instructors and even pilots have friends that fly at different other airports. Some may be controlled, uncontrolled. Maybe they're flying out of Schaumburg and they don't fly into controlled fields. Biggest thing for us is we hate playing 20 questions. It wastes time, it's inefficient, and we could be doing so much more. So give us all the info at once. Like, I'm sure you've seen in the email that give us who you are, where you are, what you want to do, and that you have the ATIS. A lot of people will call up and just say ground, and then we have to respond back, and then they'll call up and say the same thing again, except now they'll start adding pieces to it, and it's a back and forth. Especially with like pattern work, for example, a lot of people will just not say, or that you're just going for pattern work instead of saying touch and goes, stop and goes, full stop taxi backs, anything like that. So that just adds more work to us, especially when it's busier, since the ground controller, for example, is also giving clearances on another frequency. They're coordinating with approach. They're answering the phones if the phone's ringing in the cab. So if we just have to do that back and forth, it's just adds to our workload and slows things down.
Yeah, and I'll add to that a little bit, especially for the CFIs out there listening. If your student is struggling on the radios and it's pretty busy out, like step in. We want you guys to kind of step in. We understand that you're trying to let your student talk and, you know, get used to, you know, all the phraseology on the radio and everything. But if it's busy, we kind of need them to step in. So it bothers us a little bit when we're really busy and that communication is just not happening because the CFI is trying to let the student talk. And we understand that, but, you know, busy times, you got to get going. We got to be talking to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, same thing with us. I'm sure if you've flown at
Yep.
Dupage enough, especially during the summer when it's busy and we're training, you've heard one person start transmission and instantly somebody else key over and say something else. And it's the same concept for us, where when seconds matter, which with Skyhawks, we have a little bit more time because you guys are going about a mile a minute. But I mean, I'll give you a great example. Yesterday, or I want to say Monday, I was training one of our new controllers and we were on 10. There was an archer that departed 10. Another one was told to follow him. And they were both going to stay in the pattern. The guy following turned his crosswind inside of the other guy. The other guy didn't notice. There were 3 other planes in the pattern that were also working. So now we got one guy that's turning into another. Luckily, he widened out his downwind, so we changed the sequence. So rather than paying attention on our final now he's paying attention on the departure end, making sure these guys don't hit, resequencing them. He resequenced them, but the pilot of the one following now, he got confused as to which one to follow. So he literally cut right in front of the base on the other guy who was on short final. And that's kind of what we're talking about when communicate and be predictable. Those are the 2 biggest things. Like, it's a 2-way radio for a reason. If you're unsure of anything, by all means, always ask. Like, no good controller is going to get upset for you clarifying when it's busy.
Yep. And use plain language if you need it. Like if you just have no idea to explain what you're doing in good phraseology, use plain language.
Yep.
Tell us that you're unfamiliar with something. Tell us you don't know what you're doing, you know? Let us know. Communicate.
Yeah. I mean, we have a radar, so like if you're flying inbound and you're kind of confused where you are, we had this last year. Pilot was southeast of the field about 7 miles, had no idea, so we were like controlling the turn. It's like, okay, roll your wings level. We kind of figured out which direction they were going. All right, start a left turn, we'll tell you when to stop. And it was just back and forth like that. 2 months ago, we had a disoriented pilot that was 20 or 25 miles outside of our airspace even, but our frequency was the only one he could dial up. And so our tower controller had to basically guide him to the airport he was going to on his own, which completely outside of our airspace, but that's part of our job, that if you call up, we're really just there to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great advice there. We appreciate all that. Finally, I'd like to get to our last question, is just what advice would you give to a young aviator that wants to be successful in the world of aviation, whether it be being a pilot, air traffic controller, really any field?
I'd say don't get discouraged. Like, especially being on both sides of it. Hiring process for air traffic control, it is long. You might not get picked up first, second, third time, but eventually you might. Same thing with flying. Like, don't get discouraged if you don't get the offer from the company you want. Like, yeah, you may have to go be a freight dog for a couple years just to build your time up, or you may have to do ferry flights, or I started out doing aerial photography under contract, so flying just grid lines back and forth. Time building is time building. As long as you're getting paid for it, at the end of the day, you're building time and getting paid. you'll eventually get to where you want to go. I think anybody that goes into aviation should expect it to be cyclical, like almost on every 10 years, as I'm sure you being a CFI, you've probably seen it as well. Every 10 years, you have 10 years good, and then it'll slump. Like we had 9/11, then the economic crisis in, I think, 2008. Now we're going through COVID. So right around that 10-year mark is you have your good years and your bad years, but things always bounce back. Like I've seen a lot of people asking, like, I thought about being a pilot, but like, is now a good time? It's like, now is a fantastic time to start training, because by the time you get your hours, you get your commercial, you get all your ratings, airlines are going to be rehiring like crazy, and they're not going to have enough pilots again.
Yeah. Yeah, like Jason said, it takes a lot of time, dedication. Just stick with it. Some more advice I would say is to, plug in, find aviation groups out there, whether it's social media groups, in-person groups, meet people, do everything aviation related you can, because you can definitely find some good mentors out there. So the more you're involved with it, the more you're going to love it, and the more you're going to be successful at it.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to say, we got a question that came in, one more. So what are some of the wildest situations both of you have experienced during your time as controllers? If you could give us one, each of you, that would be great.
Man, I guess I'll start off. My first month training on ground, there was not like a 2 or 3 day period where we didn't have to deal with an emergency. And like some of them were some minor, like a blown tire, which we use the term emergency loosely because anytime we have to roll trucks or like do FOD checks, we'll call that. But I think there was one time that we had a plane do his front gear collapsed. And no, my first one, I actually had just started training on ground that month, and he departed. It was a twin, I think, some type of Piper. And I looked, and nobody else noticed it because they weren't really, they hadn't really gotten much time, or especially in complex aircraft. As soon as he lifted off, the nose gear I saw unlock. And as soon as that happened, I knew that's not coming up because there's something wrong with the servo that actuates it, because I had seen it happen before. And so, sure enough, I tell him, I'm like, hey, tell him to check his gear indicator, because his mains were retracting, but his nose didn't. Sure enough, he's like, yeah, I got an issue. Okay, so to circle around, that was the big one that all the news companies got a hold of, and there's a clip on YouTube all over the place. I think like a week later, we had another nose gear collapse on 20 right. And then we had either a tail strike or a nose gear collapse on 20 left, I think like 5 minutes later, closing down both parallels during the summer. And then a week later, we had a Hawker come in with malfunctioning hydraulics to where his nose wheel steering was completely dead, and he had no idea if the wheel got turned or would turn back after unlocking. So for me, that was probably the roughest month I've had at Dupage.
Yeah, I've had a lot of rough days too. I mean, we see a lot of gear issues. That's probably like one of the main things we see. Unfortunately, before I ever certified as a controller, there was a crash up around Bartlett, Illinois. So it's, I'd say 5 to 10 miles northeast of the field. So that's probably like the most severe thing since I've been there. I was, like I said, not certified at the time, but I was listening to the transmissions, and the guy said that he was having a rudder issue, and unfortunately I didn't make it, and ended up in a field. So that was pretty hard, especially not being a certified controller and being very new to the job. Other than that though, like I've been there 6 years, and knock on wood, like we've not had any major issues, especially at the airport itself. We've had gear collapses,
Smoke in the cockpit, but I'd say those are the worst.
Yeah, we've had Sky Westland there. I know.
Yeah, about 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, pretty safe operation at Dupage. We haven't had any major incidents or anything, knock on wood.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say again, thank you guys for your time. We thoroughly appreciated talking with you and all of your wisdom and knowledge and education on air traffic controlling.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Anytime, anytime. So that's it for tonight, guys. For the rest of you, we'll be on November 4th. We'll be speaking with Spartan College and discussing how you can get a bachelor's degree program. Go through a bachelor's degree program while completing your career pilot course here at Illinois Aviation. So thanks. Have a nice night. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
See ya.